This morning, we've learned that as soon as this weekend, Russia may hold elections in 4 territories, most notably Luhansk and Donetsk. He will then absorb these territories into Russia. What is NATO's reaction?
So such sham votes, referendums, do not have any legitimacy, and therefore they don't change the nature of the conflict. This remains a war of aggression by Russia against an independent sovereign nation in Europe, Ukraine. This will only further worsen the situation, and therefore we need to provide more support to Ukraine.
So is he using this to get support at home, to say I've had a success after what we saw with this counteroffensive in Kharkiv from the Ukrainian side?
As I will not speculate, but what is clear is that President Putin has not changed his ambition when it comes to Ukraine, to take control of Ukraine. And we have to remember that he has stated clearly that this is not only about Ukraine, but also about changing the European security order. That was a clear message before he invaded Ukraine. So this is about Ukraine's security, but also about our security. And therefore, these kind of referendums are just another way of making the situation on the ground even worse.
But if he takes this land, calls it Russia, that is legal territory to the Kremlin. That's how they would view it, which means potentially him putting more soldiers there, conscription soldiers, using nuclear weapons, using chemical weapons. How concerned are you if that's the path he's willing to take?
But by holding these kind of votes, that doesn't change the international recognized borders of Ukraine. Such votes do not have any legitimacy, and that's the reason why the nature of the conflicts will remain exactly the same. Any use of weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, would totally change the nature of the war. Russia knows that.
What would be the response?
We have made absolutely clear that a nuclear war should never be fought and cannot be won, and Russia knows that, and they know that we are ready to protect and defend every NATO ally.
Do you get a sense when you talk to NATO allies that building on this momentum, they will send more weapons, even the ones that they were reluctant at first to send to Ukraine?
What we see is that NATO allies, and especially the United States, are now providing unprecedented support to Ukraine with weapons, with ammunition, with more advanced weapons. And the combination of the support NATO allies and partners provide to Ukraine with the courage, the skill, the determination of the Ukrainian armed forces has actually enabled them to stop the Russian invasion, to drive them out of northern Ukraine, and now also regain or liberate territory in east and south.
But we are already seeing impacts of the policies towards this war on societies and economies across Europe, across the world really, Latin America, food security, Europe, energy. How sustainable is this? For how long are NATO allies prepared to send weapons and to continue the ammunition?
We have to support Ukraine as long as it takes, because the alternative is much more dangerous for all of us. We have to understand that this goes beyond Ukraine. Of course, we provide support to them because we have a moral obligation to support a sovereign independent nation upholding the right for self-defense. But if Putin wins in Ukraine, the lesson learned from for him, but also for other authoritarian leaders, is that they can use military power and then achieve their political goals. That makes us more vulnerable. It will make the world even more dangerous. So therefore, it is in our interest to help Ukraine prevail.
But how nervous are you about maintaining this unity, which you've been able to maintain with your NATO allies over the course of 7 months? You wrote this opinion piece in the Financial Times, and you're concerned about even civil unrest across Europe.
So I'm concerned about the fact that, of course, Ukrainians are paying a high price, but also Europeans are paying a high price, and people all over the world are paying a price. We see a surge in energy prices, in food prices, as a direct result of the reckless war by Russia against Ukraine. But at the same time, I am confident that NATO allies and partners understand that the only way of responding to this war of aggression is to support Ukraine and not allow President Putin to win.
And how do you maintain that unity? For 8 years, there's been fighting in eastern Ukraine. This could go on for years.
We maintain that unity by explaining that this is about our security interests. We cannot allow that kind of behavior to be rewarded. That will make us all more vulnerable. So this is about our security, and of course we pay a price that is measured in money, in euros and in dollars and in currency in different NATO allied countries. The price the Ukrainians are paying is measured in lost lives, in lives every day. So yes, we pay a price, but the Ukrainians are paying a much higher price, and we risk to pay a much higher price if we don't stop President Putin now in Ukraine.
You made history this year with being the Secretary General and expanding NATO with Sweden and Finland joining. How confident are you that Turkey's parliament is going to sign off on this?
I'm confident because the decision all 30 NATO allies made in Madrid in June was an historic decision to invite Finland and Sweden to join NATO. We signed the accession protocol, and now already 26 NATO allies have ratified the accession protocol. So far this is the quickest ever accession process in NATO. And then Finland, Sweden and Turkey agreed on agreement on how to work together more closely to fight terrorism, because Turkey raised some serious concerns about terrorism, and of course then NATO allies and Sweden and Finland has to address those concerns.
So you see no hurdles in this?
Well, Turkey has expressed some concerns. We addressed those concerns at the summit, and Finland and Sweden made an agreement with Turkey on how to step up cooperation. They are doing exactly that, exchanging more information on terrorism, on how to work more closely together. And of course we have to remember that no other NATO ally has suffered more terrorist attacks than Turkey. So these are legitimate concerns, and we address them together, and I'm confident that Finland and Sweden will be full members in the near future.
With NATO members having to reach their 2% target for defense spending in their GDP, how are they going to do this when you see a lot of money being spent now, credit lines being open, if you look across Europe, United Kingdom, Germany, to support their energy industry and to support factories and households? How likely is it that they're going to be able to put money now, 2% of their defense budget, to defense?
NATO allies have agreed that we should invest more in defense, and not only agreed, but actually they started to deliver on that. When we made that decision back in 2014, hardly any NATO ally spent 2% of GDP on defense. And now 10 allies spend 2% of GDP on defense, and the majority of allies have plans in place to be there by a year or two.
If they're in recession?
But NATO allies realize that we live in a more dangerous world. We had the biggest war in Europe since the end of the Second World War. We have the ramifications for the global economy with energy and food prices. So we need to invest in our security, and that's exactly what NATO allies do, because if we don't have security, if we don't have peace, then we will fail with all the other efforts on prosperity and economic growth, climate change and all the other things which are important to our agenda.
I know you're not meeting Sergei Lavrov here, but you are meeting China's foreign minister on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. We just had President Biden say that, yes, U.S. forces would go defend the island. Do you think this strategic ambiguity is working?
When the United States and NATO allies have made it clear that our policy regarding China and Taiwan has not changed, we adhere to the one China policy. Having said that, we are concerned about China's stated ambitions, coercive behavior, and there is no reason to threaten Taiwan in the way China does. So of course, this is also clearly expressed by NATO allies and also the United States.